Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the National At-Home Dad Network's webinar series. We're really excited today. We have Dr. Catherine Pearlman. She's here to talk to us about a topic that is near and dear to my heart. As we are all beginning to start with our remote learning and distance learning, for those of us who are living in areas where the schools haven't reopened, I know that I, for one, am running into a little bit of problem getting the kids to pay attention and focus on what the teacher's saying. Lord knows we've had a couple of temper tantrums. My daughter's only cried once, which, that's better than me. I've done more than that. But she's here to answer some questions and hopefully help us out with dealing with this new frontier of parenting. So without further ado, I'm going to bring aboard Catherine Pearlman. We met her the first time when she came to speak at Home Dad Con in Orlando in, 2018, I think?
Maybe, yeah. Mm-hmm.
All righty. So without further ado, here is Catherine Pearlman.
Okay, thanks. So just a little bit about me. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I've been working with children and families for 25 years now. And I'm the founder of the Family Coach, so it's my mission to help people resolve everyday parenting problems so that you can enjoy your kids more. And I think that we're all being tested to the limits at this point right now with the pandemic and distance learning. And so I'm hoping that today we can give you a few actionable tips that will help ease this transition to school. I'm a mom of two kids, so I have a 9th grade boy and a 12th grade girl, and we started school a week ago 100% online. So just to, I'll be able to give you a little bit from my personal experience and also from my professional experience about, how things might go and how you can ease the transition. So the first thing I want to talk about is frustration and anxiety. So parents themselves are at a level 10 of, I've had enough of this. It's really, been a long period of time, months and months and months of, for many families being quarantined. Some people don't have jobs, kids learning online. We are already stressed. And so then you add in going back to school and distance learning, it really puts an additional strain. And so this is a new frontier. This is not normal. So it makes sense for us to be anxious about what's happening. And that is true for our kids as well. So it's good to expect that the beginning of school will be filled with some anxiety, and maybe it'll be just like every other new beginning school year. Or for your child, this may be an extreme amount of stress and anxiety. And what I recommend to start with is that parents recognize how they're feeling so that you don't impose that on your kids. And kids pick up on our stress and our anxiety very, very easily. So if there's a way for you to kind of assess how are you feeling, how have you been presenting school to your kids, it will be helpful to rearrange how you're doing that so that you're finding other adults to talk to about your stress away from the kids. And that when you're talking about school, there's the regular excitement for the new year. If, buying new school clothes is usually a thing for you, you still want to have your regular routines, maybe a new lunchbox, even if they don't need it now. You can even pack their lunch for school if you're a working parent in their new lunchbox, and then that's something for them to look forward to. So, try to be positive, try and do the same routines that you would normally do. And so that kids kind of feel safe and secure in what they can count on, knowing that there's so much that's up in the air. And then, you might want to work on mindfulness and meditation with your kids, not during school, not right before school, but at other times, maybe even right before bed, as a way for them to kind of learn to manage some of their anxiety that might come up in the beginning of school. And then you'll have already practiced those tools and they'll be, ready to work on that. And then one thing I loved with my son's 3rd grade teacher, it was a 2nd, 3rd grade class, and she had 34 kids in the class. It was crazy. She was the most amazing teacher. And what she did, she kept saying to the kids, solve your problem. So they would say, like, what should I do if my pencil broke? What should I do if I have to go to the bathroom? What should I do if, fill in the blank? problem, and she would say, solve your problem. And she empowered even second and third graders to solve their problems. And so I really encourage parents, when it comes to distance learning, empowering your kids to solve their own problems. So give them tools, put it all out there for them so they don't have to reach and ask for something. Put the snacks on a bowl, in the kitchen, or leave out healthy options. So if they have a few minutes, they can just grab something and don't have to ask for something. Let them know if they have to go to the bathroom, that they should just go to the bathroom, or, speak with their teacher about how that's going to work, but that they have the tools so that they can put them into place and not have to call for parents, every single time. Solve your problem and empower your kids. I think that will really help. And then when your child starts to show issues of maybe concern or worry or anxiety about class or school, or how it's going to work, or how they're going to manage something once it starts, instead of telling your kid everything's going to be fine, we're going to work it out, we'll talk to your teacher, start by asking open-ended questions. So ask them, what do they what's concerning them, what are they thinking about, what are some solutions they might come up with, so that you're opening up the dialogue, and it's not so much of a parent telling the kid how it's going to go. So also to remember that everyone is new to this, right? So principals, teachers, parents, kids, we're all new, right? So it's good to have some patience, have some flexibility. Expect to have some nerves, some anxiety, some strain, happening, and that can kind of allow people to be a little less worried when things don't go right. I can tell you from our experience, and anyone on the call, if you want to even share your experience, you can put it in the chat and we can talk a little bit about it, but it 100% isn't going to go well. Like, even Zoom crashed this week. The technology that my school bought, you click the links, they don't open, or they open for a second and then they crash. You can't submit things. So that's to be expected, and that will get worked out in time. But I think the more we expect it and the more we, give the school district and the teachers and the principals a little bit of grace, I think that can lower anxiety a little bit. Also, I want to say, what to look for in your kids to know that they're really concerned or having anxiety, or there's a strain for them. So obviously, if there's a change in their behavior, they're crying more, they're having more tantrums, they're avoiding things they normally would do without a problem, they're not sleeping well, or they're complaining of somatic complaints, like their stomach isn't feeling well, their head is hurting, they can't sleep, things like that. That's a sign that, your child is exhibiting anxiety, and you might want to work through some of that and get help from professional, maybe talk to your child's teacher, work with the open-ended questions, and use the mindfulness as well as a way. So I'm going to talk about some other suggestions, but if you have questions while it's happening, then, oh, my husband joined. Hello. If you have questions, just put them in the chat pane, and I'll answer them as we go. So it's really important when things are out of sorts, when things are not typical, that you kind of have a schedule, and that can give your kids some sense of normalcy in a very not normal time. So as much as you can, keep the schedule like it always is. So that would be to have more, so whatever your sleep time is, to make sure that you keep sleep time the same time. Bath, if your routine before bed is bath, reading stories, bedtime, try and keep that the same, because that sense of normalcy, that sense of every day is the same, will help when things are really not the same when it comes to school. Write down the daily schedule for your kids. This is especially true for younger kids, but honestly, even older kids can feel a little more comforted by knowing what to expect when in the day, when is lunch, when is break, when do they have math, when do they have history, what's playtime, when's outdoor time, when are they going to see their friends. So that can be helpful. Put in blocks with break time. So even if it's super short, just being able to see, okay, I have 45 minutes and then I have a little break, that can be really helpful. And then every school is still going to have lunch, and that's an opportunity for you to make it fun for your kids, take a break, get the cool lunchbox out, maybe go outside and play a game, but use that for what's going to work best for your child. Somebody wrote a question. I have a kindergartner who has no interest in Zoom. I get it. And a third grader. Any tips for balancing both at the same time? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second, but thanks for that question. That's a good one that I think a lot of people have. Focus on the schedule. And again, the most important thing is that you try to keep things normal as you can, things, how you typically do things in your house. Sleep is so vital. So your kids still getting to bed on time, getting the most amount of sleep is actually going to help them be able to focus and sit in a chair more for the next day. I want to talk a little bit about Workspace. So for parents, we imagine a desk, a chair. We imagine clearing it up and setting it up like they would have for school. But the thing is, this isn't school, and a lot of the reinforcements that help kids stay focused at school don't exist here. So what I recommend is thinking about your child and where's the best space for your child. I know for our kids, sitting in a chair at their desk has actually been much more difficult than I would have anticipated. And they sit at school with no problem, but they get up much more, and there's just more focus in the classroom. So, think a little bit more flexibly, especially for the older kids. And also you can think about, if you have a kid that needs to move a lot, then maybe sitting on a ball or a rolly stool, or standing, whatever might work, but you could think outside the box a little bit and realize that your kid may not be sit at the desk in, focus for this period of time. And what's sometimes hard is that, well, some kids can do it, so we expect that all kids can, but they can't all. So know your kid and find the right workspace for them. I heard of somebody using a closet that was, very closed in, and that was really good for focusing for their kid. But so do what works for you. And also think about where technology is. Think about where cell phones are. Think about where there's other distracting, especially this is for teens, but where there's other distractions that wouldn't normally be in the classroom. Try and take those distractions away. And if kids are uncomfortable, they won't stay focused. I mean, that's really the main thing to remember. So, and if your workspace is not working for you, then, readjust, change it up. So here are some just general tips. One is that you have to have patience. This is, not normal for anybody. And it's really pushing as time goes on, it's really becoming more and more uncomfortable and, less something that we want to do anymore. But this is where we are. It will not always be like this, but having some patience, having some grace that things aren't going to go the way that we expect them to go, I think will really help. Set goals for each day, even if they're very small, but try to have something achievable that the kid is looking forward to or that the kid is trying to achieve, especially for kids that are really struggling with Zoom or with sitting in class or with turning in assignments. Have a small goal for the kid. If they don't achieve it, in the beginning, don't worry about it. But if they do, then that's when we give the high fives. We let them know we're so proud of them. We give them a lot of positive feedback for that. But I think really setting minute goals for the day, even if it's a positive attitude, can be really helpful. So when your kids are at school, many of them are going to be on their devices because a lot of us are homeschooling. And they're exhausted from staring at the screen, but what they really want to do is also stare at the screen after school. They want to play video games. They want to chat with their friends, be on social media, Snapchat, whatever it may be. But the thing is, at some point, you have really diminishing returns where they are exhausted. There's, the light from the devices and the computer. There's a constant connection that they're not used to. So try to have times where you really limit the devices and there's like a no device time of day. It could be great if it's the same for everybody. We turn it off from 6 to 8, or, we put them away after school or whatever works for you, but try and schedule in the day a time where there is going to be no screens. And your kids will complain. They'll be really mad. But if you stick to it after a couple of days, they'll just accept it and move on. And also, I always say to limit devices an hour before bed. That's just, for good sleep hygiene. you know your child. You know your child best. And if you know your child typically struggles in a particular area, now is the time to talk to the teacher, advocate at the school. I know some kids are being put in, let's say, PM kindergarten, and they're done in the afternoon. There's no way they're going to have a full day and then kind of be able to rein it in and focus in the afternoon. So that's when you would advocate for your kid to try and be in the morning program, or work with a teacher to slowly ramp up your child's participation. If this is all new to them, especially if you have kindergarten, first, second grade, this is not going to be like they're just going to sit at the computer and it's all going to work great for many kids. And teachers are going to have to be a little bit more understanding. But the thing is, you have to communicate with your teacher. You have to be problem solving together to work through some of those issues. And get offline as much as possible. So if kids are doing homework, if you can print that out rather than doing it on the computer and then put it back in, even though that seems a little bit more time consuming, just being able to step away from the computer, especially for kids that are older and more distracted, or for young kids who aren't used to seeing, a screen all day like this, it can be helpful. So if you can print stuff out, if they can get actual books, I know for our district, they were saying, you can't request books, everything is online. But then they were saying, well, if your kid really needs a book, say your kid really needs a book and get the book, and so that your kid can read offline. And again, limiting the amount of time that they're online is helpful.
Dr. Pearlman,
yes.
You got a question that came in on the chat that I think is a big one. My kids are both young, so this doesn't really apply to me. But one of our watchers has a child in high school who's just feeling really down right now about school, politics, society, everything that's going on. And we don't have great answers as parents right now. What do you recommend for talking to them about these really hard issues?
I think as parents, sometimes we want to make everything better and we want to have the answers. We're used to kind of controlling the environment for our kids. And as they get older, and in like times of like major, community struggle, like, hurricane or, pandemic, something like that, we really can control our environment. And the best thing to do is to let your kids express their pain and frustration without trying to make it better sometimes. To be able to say, honey, this is a really hard time and I'm glad you're able to talk about it with me. Tell me more about how you're feeling. Instead of trying to say that it's all going to be okay. Right now, it's not going to be okay. It might not be okay for a long time for some kids, for some families. And so just being able to feel heard and to be able to express yourself is very healing, rather than just being told everything is going to be okay. The other thing is, I say use with caution, but sometimes this really makes sense, is to let your kids behind the curtain a little bit and say, I feel the same way. I'm also struggling. I don't have the answers, and this is really, really, really hard. But I'm here and I'm with you, and together we're gonna get through. We're gonna figure this out. We're gonna take it day by day. But that's kind of the best we can do. We can't really make this all better, and that's frustrating for our kids as much as it is for us as parents. And so I don't have any good answers either. I wish I did. And I've known from my own emotional roller coaster over this time that, I'm feeling a lot. And for parents, it's good to be able to have a friend, a partner, someone where you can really express yourself to. And for kids, I think that's important too. And a lot of times they can't talk this stuff with their friends. And so one way that I help teens open up is texting. So when I know that my kid is having a hard time and is just not able to talk about it, I might text, literally sitting right next to my kids. Is there anything you want to talk about? Or you seem really sad. You want to tell me what's going on? Right away from text, she gets going. And the next thing you know, we're actually having a real conversation. You can take it off texting, but sometimes just texting can get the conversation going. So I feel that problem personally, and the best thing we can do is try and be open about our feelings, express empathy, and be there, create a secure place at home for our kids. Yeah, so thank you for that question. I have a couple more tips, and then I'm going to open up for questions. So if there's anything on your mind, it could be about school. Honestly, it could be about anything parenting. While I'm here, I'm happy to talk about anything parenting, really. Avoid gaming for your kids or social media unless it's kind of in the schedule, so that 1 hour doesn't become 2 hours, doesn't become 4 hours, because parents are busy also. Some people are working, some people are minding other kids, and so the kid goes off gaming, and the next thing you know, it's been hours and you haven't really thought about it. But if you have it on the schedule, then the kid knows what time it's supposed to be over. You can plan for it, and you're much more likely to keep the schedule, the amount of screen time down to what you really want. But at the same time, I do want to say, I know I'm talking a lot about minimizing screen time. Parents have been asking me, like, my kid is watching, the iPad right now while I'm on a call with you, or, I'm really struggling because I have to do things, and the only thing I can do for my kid is screen time. So there's going to be more screen time than normal, and not just for school. And some of that is actually okay. That's just us getting by. That's us in survival mode. But when things seem like they're a little bit better, or you're not on a call or making dinner or minding other kids, then that's the time to try and get off the screen and find other things for your kids to do. Another thing I recommend is some sort of comfort toy, fidget spinner type gadget, something that your kids can hold while going to school. So there's a million different fidget toys. I've just bought 2 different ones for my son. But in addition to like the ball or a comfortable seat, some kids like something really smooth. They might like a plush stuffed animal sitting with them. They might like something to, putty, something to hold with their hands. That can really, busy hands can also really help keep the focus on. So even if your kid hasn't typically, enjoyed using any of this stuff, it might be a good time to have some options out, and your kid might actually grab it, in a way that they hadn't before. And then just a couple more things. As parents, we need to step back. We need to give our kids more ownership of their school time. And even for some younger kids, this is true. We get intimately involved in helping them get their homework done and making sure it's submitted. And a lot of that really should be on the child. And if it doesn't go well, that's something they're going to have to either face the consequences, work it through with the teacher. But the more involved you are, the more involved you have to stay, and the less skills the child learns in managing their work, their time, their focus, all of those things. So do what you have to do. Of course, our kids need supervision, but do the minimum so that you can really encourage your kids to rise up to the challenge and take ownership. And, I used to empty my kid's backpack. I used to take it in from the car, bring it to the car from school. And then one day I thought, this is ridiculous. Like, when my kids go to school, they hang up their backpack, they take their lunchbox out, they put it in the bin. They really do a lot of things because the teacher can't manage all these things with 34 kids. And so I want to help my kids, but also I don't want to do everything for my kids. I want them to be able to do for themselves. So think about ways that you can step back and give your kids ownership. Last 2 things before I get to questions is positive reinforcement. I can't say enough about positive reinforcement at this time. It's going to be very tempting to correct our children a lot when they're, fidgeting, getting up, not focusing, not doing their work. That's somewhat important to, help our kids through some of that with redirection, but in a way, really focusing on the positives, focusing on how the child is doing when she's doing well, or how focused the child was even for a half hour doing homework before he lost it. So focusing on positive reinforcement, and this is sometimes where the little daily goals can come in. Whatever your child is working on, try to find a couple of things where you can see your child doing well and make sure to say something about it. It's really helpful when they're getting a lot of overcorrection. And then obviously I can't leave this talk without saying to ignore it. Your kids are going to be doing a lot of whining, complaining. There may be more tantruming, and some of that is because they're frustrated, and we need to work on minimizing their frustration. But also some of that is attention seeking. And so when we've met their needs, when we've said no to something, and they're still kind of whining, complaining, when they're pushing our buttons, then that's when you should ignore it. You don't have to engage in every argument that's put in front of you or every behavior. If you can ignore some of those attention-seeking behaviors, whining, complaining, negotiating, then those will minimize and your child will find other more pleasant ways to get your attention and get things done. So I know you guys have heard me talk about that a lot, but I just want to put it in there. I have another question that I can see. My son's main way of engaging with friends these days is via video games, playing online with them, which makes me feel guilty because he's been on the screen all day. Is that okay? For sure, on some level, that's okay. That is, we have the same issue here. And I think that, what can be helpful is that, number one, you're making sure your kid is playing with their friends and they're not just playing with random strangers on the internet. Not that I think that playing games with random strangers in a safe environment is a problem in general, maybe for your teenager, but in this time, if the whole goal is socializing, then make sure it's an organized game that your kid is going online and, I'm meeting Johnny online and we're going to play this game, so that they're actually getting socialization from their friends and not, random people. And then make sure that then that's just like a limited time. Like even if that time is 2 hours, that's okay. But then when the 2 hours is up, then it's over. And I would stay really firm with that because again, it's such a slippery slope. If you say it's going to be 2 hours and then the kid whines and complains and you're like, fine, you could have 15 more minutes, then you're just reinforcing the whining, complaining, and really that end time doesn't mean anything. So you say 6 o'clock, but they know it's not really 6 o'clock. So I totally would allow it. I think it's really important. The other thing is that if your kid is getting all their work done and is keeping it together and doesn't seem depressed or anxious or having other side effects, then I really have less worry about them having a little bit more screen time, especially if it's with their friends or if it's gaming. Where it comes to be a problem is if your kids aren't able to do their work, they're not sleeping well, they're not eating well, they're showing other, tantruming behaviors, they're becoming more antisocial, that kind of stuff. They're not going outside anymore. That kind of stuff is then when I really want to focus on limiting the screen time. The other thing we didn't talk about is, kids need to move. And so it reminds me of kind of my friends years ago had a puppy, and if the dog went for a long walk in the morning, then was great the rest of the day. And if the dog didn't go for a long walk, the dog was crazy and needy. And it always made me laugh because kids are not so different, and even adults aren't so different. Like they need to move and play and exercise, and you could be really flexible on what that looks like. But I really recommend having some time, especially if they're on their computer all day, where they disconnect and move their bodies.
So, Catherine, I got a couple of questions that have come on our Facebook page.
Yes.
The first one is from Carl Wilkie, who was wondering roughly how much online time do you recommend doing like actual school each day? His girls are going into 5th grade and 2nd grade.
Okay. Hi, Carl. The thing is, the problem is that some schools are really consolidating time online and giving more time offline for kids to get their work done. Other schools are trying to accommodate kids in a different way, and they really have them online for huge chunks of the day. So I can't really say because school is somewhat dictating that. But I will say after school, in general, 1 to 2 hours is really maximum. And the thing is, if you were homeschooling your kid, like truly homeschooling, they would be doing schooling in elementary school for 2 to 3 hours a day. I mean, that's really all it takes to get the work done. But in, public school, it's very different. So, you could work with your teacher if your child is, really losing it because it's too much, or if they need more instructional time. But I'm just going to focus on after school. And I think 1 to 2 hours for elementary school is really the max.
All right, another question we have coming in from Micah is, what do you do when ignoring it doesn't work with the kids needing to actually do their schoolwork?
Right.
The kids just keep melting down and just won't do it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here's the thing. We can't make the kids do their schoolwork. You cannot make them do anything. You can create a ready environment and you can encourage them to do it, but you cannot make them. And the more you push, the more they can fall apart. So when I say ignore it, there's certain things that we can ignore and obviously certain things we can't ignore. If they're not able to submit their work or they're falling behind in school, they're not doing what the school is requiring of them, then after you've tried positive reinforcement and you've tried working with the school, then I would start with consequences. You know, there are some natural consequences that'll happen, like you're not going to make it to third grade if you don't do the work, and that's a real fear, and sometimes that can give kids a kick in the tush. But also, there may be consequences at home. So your kid loves some video game or the Switch or loves watching YouTube videos or whatever it is, and you could say, look, these are the things that have to get done first. If they get done, great, you'll have time for this. If they don't, there will be a consequence. And when you impose a consequence, there will be a lot of whining, screaming, complaining, the whole thing. Whenever I see that, I think that's great because that's a sign your kid is getting the message. The more pain they're feeling, I don't mean physically, the more tomorrow when you say, okay, I could see you're really not interested in doing this work. That's really your choice. If you don't get it done, you'll also lose your screen time again. And after a couple of days, kids will realize this is not worth it. So you have to give them the tools so that they can be successful. But if they're willfully defying the things that need to get done, we're not going to ignore that. We can start imposing a consequence. It's the same as, you know, if you don't do your chore, then there's a consequence. Like doing schoolwork is not really optional. And if parents kind of make some of it optional or help out too much or get involved too much, then the kids don't take ownership of it, and that kind of complaining cycle happens forever.
So one of my questions that I was having is my daughter, who's in first grade, one of the problems that I have is she keeps hiding from the screen. Literally, she'll be sitting here at the desk, and at some point she'll just put her head down and hide from the screen. And the teachers have a problem with that because they need to be able to see the kids. And the minute she does it, my immediate assumption is she's hiding from the actual work as well.
Mm-hmm. Hold on, Sarah just wrote it. Sarah, you didn't miss it. I'm going to get to it. Sorry about that. You know, that's a little bit of an issue because it's very hard for kids that may be a little bit more shy, more a little quieter, or not wanting to be the focus of attention, to be on Zoom and be present the whole time. You know, that is not comfortable for a lot of young people. It's not comfortable for a lot of adults either. I'm a professor, so for me, teaching my class and even being in meetings, I know when people's cameras are off, it's very hard to know that people are still engaged in the meeting. So I understand where the teacher is coming from in that situation. And I think to start working with a happy medium. So I might say, okay, if she's feeling like she needs to go off camera, let her set a minute timer, like, you know, the kind of kitchen timer, take a break, get off camera, and then she has to get back on. You might ask the teacher if that works, and also like kind of gradually get up to the point where she's on all the whole time. You know, maybe the whole time right from the beginning is just too much for her. And if you don't resolve this, then she's going to start having trouble even sitting there and paying attention. So I would work with the teacher on a happy medium, but with the idea of upping the time, with working it out so she can feel comfortable. And maybe she doesn't get called on, or maybe she has a way of raising her hand when she wants to get called on, or she works out something with a teacher, but I think it's okay. She's saying, I need some respite, and then try and work out something with the teacher about how to accomplish that. But that's really hard. And what I've seen is when that's not resolved, kids stop wanting to go to school altogether. So I think it's important to keep working on that. Okay, so let me go back to the question. I have a kindergarten who has no interest in Zoom and a third grader. Tips on balancing both kids. You know, it's a struggle. And first, I'd like to say that the more you can empower, especially the third grader, to take care of his or her own needs, to, you know, provide everything that's needed there, to give a lot of positive reinforcement for sitting, listening, doing the work. that can be really helpful. And then in the same way I was just saying to the previous question, working up to it, for a kindergartner, like just going to school is, new for some kindergartners, or going all day, but now doing it online and focusing on a video. And it's craziness to expect kindergartners like right off the bat to be able to do this. I would kind of work with the kindergartner and the teacher to slowly get accustomed, instead of saying you have to stay on this, it's an hour call, you have to do it. Work on building up to that kind of pace. And as far as managing, how like sometimes you tell a child, like you're in the middle of a conversation, you say, hold it 1 second, honey, I'll be right with you. And then you get back to them. You might want to have some sort of signal or sign that says, you need to hold on, manage your own self for a few minutes. I will get back to you, but I'm dealing with something else right now. So the kid knows you're coming for help, but it doesn't have to be immediate. The kids freak out and they need immediate assistance. Most likely they don't. Whatever their problem is probably not an emergency. So if you could work out something with your kids to say, this is the sign when I hold up whatever, I touch my nose, it means I hear you, but I need to be with you in a few minutes. Just take a couple deep breaths and hold on. So I don't know if that was helpful, Sarah, but it's a struggle. I do want to say that. I feel you.
Does anyone else out there have any questions? For those of you who are actually live on the Blue Jeans call, if you go to the little people button that's up in the same area, you can actually raise your hand. And if you wanted to, we can unmute you and you can actually talk to Catherine yourself. A couple of other questions that I was going to ask is, my daughter's meltdown today was largely over following directions. Well, it wasn't yesterday or today, it was yesterday. But there was literally an issue where the teacher wanted them to write a sentence, and they had to write one sentence that was the sentence that she wanted them to write, and then they could write any sentence that they wanted to. And she was ready to die on the hill over wanting to write her sentence and not the teacher's. Now, I mean, she's only in first grade, so it's not like the teacher's going to flunk her or anything for not following directions. But as a kid who fought fighting, like following any directions as a kid and suffered for it in his academic life later, I want to prevent her from falling onto that same path.
So the thing is, she can't learn the lessons you've already learned by you telling her. It doesn't work that way. She has to literally learn those lessons by doing and experiencing some of that discomfort of when things don't go her way. Is she a negotiator in general? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I might work on the negotiation in general because she thinks she can kind of work her way through something to make it more palatable. And a lot of times, parents think, what's the big deal about negotiation? Everybody wins. It's the exact opposite in parenting. If you're negotiating, you're losing because you had an idea in the beginning of what should happen. The TV should go off. They should be sitting down at the table for dinner. They should be taking a bath, whatever it is. And when you start negotiating, it becomes the child is running the palace, and is deciding how things should go. You've lost control, and that can be very frustrating because then everything gets negotiated. It's like, why would I do what you say when I can try and, get something a little bit better? Why should I eat my carrots when I know I can only eat one and you'll move on? So I might say, rather than worry about what happens in school, let the teacher, like when I was saying step back, this is where I would let the teacher have the consequence. You can make your recommendation. Listen, honey, if you don't do what the teacher's asking, you're not going to be able to do, you're not going to be able to learn or get the full experience, or there might be a consequence. Do you want to try one more time? You've given the support you can. And she doesn't do it, let the teacher have the consequence. I would stay out of it, honestly. And then I would work on negotiation other parts of the day. Like whenever you've said something, what has to happen? That's it. Don't negotiate. If, like sometimes they say there's no dessert. And then the kid's like, but we have leftover cake. But I just said no dessert. Unfortunately, I kind of shot myself in the foot. There is no dessert tonight, but I'll remember for tomorrow. And you can remind me in the morning that it's there, something like that. but try really to firm that up in the next like couple of weeks. And some of that might come down on its own when she realizes life isn't always negotiable. Like it isn't on her terms. And sometimes rules are rules and they have to be followed. So that's probably what I would do to help in that situation.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
You were mentioning earlier about kids who don't hold still. My daughter is one of those, and we found something wonderful to help. This is called a wiggle seat.
Uh-huh.
And they sit down on it, but it's kind of like one of the gym stabilization balls.
Yeah.
So that they constantly have to move to keep their balance. And I found that enables her to sit, at least, without jumping up and in and out of the chair the whole time a little better.
That's amazing. That's a great solution. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
All right, I am looking. I'm not seeing any other questions coming from Blue Jeans. Seeing any? Well, one other comment that we did have come in is that Kyle Denny wanted to personally thank you for coming and talking to the Dad's Book Club.
Sure. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, he was just wanted to point out that they are big fans and really appreciated being able to speak with you.
Great. I'm always happy to help.
Well, look, guys, on behalf of the National At-Home Dad Network, I want to thank you for coming to join us today, Dr. Pearlman. I want to thank everybody that came to join us for the webinar. I hope we found something that will help you out. For any of the dads out there that are listening, our normal National At-Home Dad Network convention that we usually have in person every year, obviously we're not doing that this year with the situation what it is. However, we are doing DadCon at home, which is going to be a one-day virtual event. We're going to have the same kind of breakouts. We're going to have keynote speakers. We've got a couple of really, really great speakers lined up for everybody. Our opening speaker is going to be Dr Pearlman of the Squat for Change movement. I don't know if you remember the picture of the gentleman who was squatting in the men's room, changing his kid's diaper on his lap because there was no changing table in any men's room where he was. So he managed to turn that around into his own movement, which the main thing I remember, one of the first things that happened was Pampers jumped on board and bought 5,000 changing tables to put into men's rooms across the country, which is always a plus for those of us dads who are in need of changing a diaper. But the best part is that it's going to be a really affordable day. It's only going to be a $50 event, and that includes membership to the National At-Home Dad Network. It also includes a small donation for the Brian Dixon Memorial Scholarship Fund to help out those who may not be able to afford to come to the convention. And, if you think you can't, feel free to apply for that scholarship. So on behalf of the National At-Home Dad Network, I just want to thank everybody and have a great day. And, we're going to get through this together.
Hang in there.
All right. Goodbye, all.